Today's episode has been brought to you by OfferingTree. If you have not heard about OfferingTree yet, this is my favorite all-in-one platform for yoga teachers who want to have a website online or integrate their online offerings with their existing website. You can schedule classes, you get to share all of your offerings on there, and OfferingTree is really a company that is listening to yoga teachers, listening to what they need, what they want, helping them with their education as well. If you're looking for an easier way to have your yoga business online, head over to offeringtree.com/Shannon, and we have a special listener-only discount there. Hello, and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns. Today, I'm still practicing how to share my social location thanks to our podcast with Rauda. That was back in episode 266. And I'm so excited that some of you have also been doing the same in our Facebook group. I put a post in there and I'm just thrilled that other people are practicing or other people are asking questions about it. Today, I'm recording this episode from my home. It's on Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga land, known as the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. I'm a citizen here and I have health care that is paid for when I need it. I'm a cisgender middle-class woman living in a white, average-size, able body. As some of you know, I did have an injury with my spine in the last little while, but overall, I'm able to do many things. I speak English, I went to college, my family has a history of mental health issues, and so I make sure that I make therapy a priority. A random fact about me is I once traveled to Caracas, Venezuela, which really was the most dangerous trip I think I've ever been on. It's the most dangerous place I ever went to. This is a while back that I went, and the most dangerous moment of this trip is what really pops into my mind. I was sitting and waiting on the beach for my friend who was surfing. And I was alone, and I had had many chats with the family that I was staying with about the dangers of showing my blue eyes or speaking English. In some places, it was really dangerous to do that. Anyway, I was on the beach, and this dog came up and sat with me. And I was petting the dog and visiting with the dog there and just looking out on the ocean. And all of a sudden, these two men were walking in one direction, saw me, and turned right towards my direction. I kind of froze. I don't know if the dog sensed that, but the dog reacted as soon as those two men got close to me. The dog went berserk, started freaking out, barking like crazy, and the men just paused and turned back the other way. And I really feel like that day that dog saved my life. And it was a stray dog on the street. And when we got back to the car, the friend that I was traveling with and I were going to have lunch, and I ate my lunch, and then I went to give the last bit of my lunch to this dog. And my friend got really angry, and he was like, "You're being wasteful with your food." And I was like, this dog earned part of my lunch. And I proceeded to feed the dog some of my lunch and be very, very thankful. It was also a beautiful place to travel to. I don't want to give it just a bad name. It was just this most dangerous place I ever went to was on that day for sure. For those of you who have been here for a while, you know that I'm a mom of three, a yoga teacher, podcaster, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And this podcast was created for you so that each and every week you are connected to the information and inspiration that will support you as you build your unique yoga business. And before we get into today's episode, I'd like to share a content warning in case you are driving or listening as you walk, and in case this is on a day where you need something that doesn't have a trigger warning and is a little bit lighter. So this podcast episode today mentions sexual violence and may be upsetting for some listeners. Please see the show notes if you want specific details of the content that we discuss, and please take care of yourself as you listen. This week on the podcast, we're talking about yoga for survivors of sexual assault. You may or may not be aware that April is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month in the United States, and in Canada, it's May that is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. Sexual abuse is a huge crisis around the world. The WHO estimates that 1 in 3 women worldwide experience sexual or physical violence in their lifetime. In the US, someone is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds, and in Canadian schools, 23% of girls experience sexual violence. 5 to 10% of men report a history of childhood sexual abuse, and this statistic is likely higher in reality. Sexual assault is something that affects everyone, and today I am so glad that Nikki Adams is here to share with us more about this topic and how yoga, particularly trauma-informed yoga, can be an option, an entry point for healing for survivors. Nikki is a trauma-informed yoga teacher and owner of Beauty for Ashes Wellness Cultivation. She helps survivors of childhood sexual abuse empower themselves to trust, love, and heal their bodies. Through wellness and yoga, Nikki creates an inspirational, safer space for survivors to naturally break through the stigma of childhood sexual abuse. She draws on her own personal experiences and the healing techniques that have helped her in her own healing journey so that she can then help others. Nikki talks about how yoga helped her as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and explains why all yoga teachers and humans need to be trauma-informed. She also offers advice on what poses help and what ones might be triggering, how to hold space with compassion for everyone because we've all dealt with trauma at some point in our lives, and the importance of giving choices and the language we use as yoga teachers. Nikki also talks about how we as yoga teachers can reassess our yoga spaces from a more trauma-informed lens. I learned so much in this interview with Nikki, and I cannot wait to share it with you so that we can learn together. But before that, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, OfferingTree, and tell you about a really great article that they just put out. I will make sure that I link to this in our show notes, this article on alternatives for yoga studio models. And I think this is such a great topic, and especially right now, as we've gone through the pandemic, as a lot of studios moved online, things got shook up in the yoga world, and it's time to re-examine, is that yoga studio model still working for us? There are a couple other models, and I love how OfferingTree breaks it down. There's the collective studio model. We've talked about that here on the podcast as well. And the rental studio model. We have an episode for each one of those. And this article really breaks down all of the pros and cons and things to think about with regards to both of these. And here's the amazing thing, connected yoga teachers. OfferingTree is a company that has an online software for yoga teachers, an all-in-one software that will take over, everything that you need from website to payments to your schedule. All of the parts are all there in one software, but they also really focus on education and helping teachers and serving yoga teachers. And this is why I wanted to call attention to this article, because OfferingTree puts content out there that really is helpful for yoga teachers, and they don't have to. It's like a bonus that they have. They also do webinars to help yoga teachers, and so make sure to check out OfferingTree.com. And if you are wanting a discount, if you're thinking, hey, I want to check out this software, you can check it out for free for 14 days. And then if you do sign up, make sure you use our discount for our listeners. It's at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. I also want to give a shout out to all of our listeners in Canada who are maybe having an Easter holiday weekend. If you're listening in real time in Canada, we have Good Friday and Easter Monday. So Easter is a 4-day weekend for us. For those of you who are filling up on eggs or decorating eggs or spending your time enjoying some chocolate or time with family and friends, I just wanted to give a shout out. I also want to say a special thank you to Heather, who left a comment on our website after we posted episode 213 with Dawn Vason. So Heather says, OMG, I just listened to this podcast and it was exactly what I needed. I love the concept of systems. We can set amazing goals, but if we don't have a system, the goals can seem very overwhelming. Thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Shannon. Both of you are amazing women. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you, Heather, for taking the time to leave a comment on our website. I love it when listeners do that. It makes a big difference to really read when you have questions or to read your feedback about an episode. And I just wanted to say thank you to anyone who's done that. If you haven't left us a review yet, you can go to our show notes page. So today that's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/268. Look for the button that says leave a review at the top or scroll down to the bottom and leave us a comment. Okay, let's get right into this conversation today with Nikki. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Nikki. It is so great to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I feel so honored to be able to be on this podcast. I listen to you all the time.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it that you're a listener of the podcast. Tell our listeners, what is the work that you do and who do you do it for?
So I am a trauma-informed yoga teacher, and I specialize in survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And how did you decide, okay, yoga fits really well with this? When did that start?
It started in 2019. That's when I started my yoga practice. And I realized, like, when I would get onto the mat, because first of all, I started yoga because I wanted to like do a split, and it was my 100th attempt at changing my body. I thought I was going to lose weight and all that. But when I started practicing, I would get onto my mat, and I remember the teacher saying, like, meet yourself where you are. And I never really heard that before. So I really got, I want to say attached to that feeling and that permission. And I would get onto the mat one way, feeling not, visible because I'm a big Black woman in a yoga class full of skinny white ladies. I would feel I have a lot of things going on in my life or things like that. And then I would get off of my mat and feel totally different, almost like a weight lifted off of my shoulders. And I always knew I wanted to help others because I'm a survivor myself. I didn't know which way it was going to go. And I started realizing, like, this is really helping me. This is really kind of pushing me forward. I became a yoga teacher in 2020, and then a trauma-informed yoga teacher did a like class in one of my yoga teacher training segments. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be a trauma-informed yoga teacher. And I just realized that being able to, like, not have to speak about what happened to me and being able to process through my body was very important, a very important part of my healing journey. And I wanted to share that with other survivors. So that's how I began.
That's amazing. I'm so glad that you saw this working in your own life. And I love this idea of yoga allowed you to move. And this teacher said, let's meet you where you're at, even though you had gone to that class and were thinking, like many of us do, I want to change this thing about my body. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And I know that you are a firm believer that every yoga teacher should be trauma informed. Can you talk about the importance of that?
So, yes, I do believe that. And not only yoga teachers, just humanity in general. Everyone has been through trauma. None of us is left unscathed. And if anyone didn't go through trauma up until 2020, we all have dealt with a collective trauma uh, uh, in the last couple years. So um, if you're teaching yoga, you're teaching trauma survivors. So I just believe that, having that awareness around knowing that everyone has been through trauma and being able to step into the seat of the teacher or stand in, the seat of the teacher, it's important to be able to have that compassion and give grace and give permission and choices and use gentle and invitational language because you don't know who's walking into your classroom. And with the simple awareness of knowing that everyone has been through something, it will help, be able to provide that safe, sacred space for everyone in your class.
I want to really highlight this, what you just said. We don't know, and everyone has dealt with some form of trauma. What about when a yoga student does confide in us and tells us, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse? What do you wish yoga teachers knew in that moment? If probably all of a sudden they're thinking, oh my gosh, what do I as a yoga teacher need to know right now? How can I help this person?
I think one of the things is knowing what poses you're going to teach that day. So if it's a pose where you're vulnerable, like Supta Baddha Konasana, bound angle with soles of the feet together, knees out, you might not really want to do that. Or uh, different, I know some yoga studios have like smells, like different incense or a certain lighting or using different language, like press into the knife edges of your feet or different things that could trigger a survivor, especially a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. Just having that awareness, like, okay, so this person is in my class and I'm not going, I'm going to create a class that everyone can do and be safe and um, try not to trigger people. It's hard, it takes work, and because we're so used to going into a class, naming off poses, even in different people's bodies, like there's a lot of now where things are changing, but you go into a class and you just, you know, chaturanga, this, that, whatever, and without thinking about how this is going to affect a person's body. So that's how I think about it. That's what I think.
I'm thinking that most of our students who have dealt with childhood sexual abuse or trauma of some form are just not coming forward. So I really appreciate you saying we can rethink some of our cues and some of the poses that we use. And I bet our yoga teachers are just sitting here thinking, "Oh gosh, the last thing we want to do is trigger someone in a class or activate their nervous system in a negative way." How does yoga help someone? Like, what was your personal experience of what were the moments in the classes that you were in or in your own practice where you thought this is really beneficial for me?
Mhm. I think, like I said before, being able to move through my body and not having to speak about it, like all therapeutic services are needed. I just feel personally like with talk therapy, sometimes there can be like a re-trigger and you're going deep into into what happened, but instead you're dealing with like the present moment, how you're feeling in that moment. Sometimes uh, things may come up, but the tools like focusing on your breath, focusing on an affirmation or a word that keeps you anchored. I think, you know, one of the postures or poses in um, that really helped me. I know a lot of people don't like this pose, but is pigeon pose. And the reason why I loved it was because I was able to kind of like fold into my body and like feel like safe and like create this like barrier and just really feel safe in my body. And so that, I mean, there's so many things. The breathing, the using like ujjayi breath, the slight constriction in the back of your throat, that really helped with my nervous system, like keeping me in the present moment. The sound, that sound of an ocean. And if I'm not mistaken, some people say it tones the vagus nerve, which it is in control of the fight or flight response. So yeah.
I love it. I love to hear your personal experience of it. And like you said, some people don't like pigeon pose. Well, they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
So what have you learned as you work with survivors right now? What do you learn from their experience using yoga? You said that you noticed a real difference between talk therapy and trying yoga in that you could be in this present moment. Is that similar for other people that you work with, or what are some of their experiences?
Yeah. So one of the things I see is that healing and starting the healing journey through yoga is possible. I see that when I facilitate groups, creating that community of support and having people around you that, know what you've been through, know, that you're feeling like you're not alone. And, the survivors that I've worked with definitely felt safe in their bodies and felt, refreshed and just I have a couple survivors that turned into yoga teachers. So, like, giving that empowerment of knowing that, like, you're not stuck in that abused state anymore. You can move forward. You can do things in life. You can help others with your story. And yeah, I feel like that's what it is. A lot of survivors I've worked with definitely have like took leaps of faith they never thought they could and are living like a more fulfilled life with their practice. So that's what I think.
That's amazing. I follow you on Instagram, and I know that you were talking about leaps of faith recently, and that's really
Mhm.
exciting. I'm wondering what went into deciding, okay, this is the niche I'm going to go into. Like, was there some um, ever some fears that arose, or some doubt, or in any way did that feel like a leap of faith, really saying, okay, this is who I want to serve, this is who I'm going to show up to serve? Yeah, I'm wondering what that was like as a yoga teacher.
So I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and I know that looking for modalities to heal, to help myself is very hard. Sexual, like, childhood sexual abuse is under the umbrella of sexual assault, but there's not a lot of things working with that specific, trauma. And I knew that because I didn't get what I needed, like, I just know that what I had, I wish I had earlier. I wish I would have known like about yoga and different other practices other than, you need all the things. I'm not dissing anything. Like, you need all the things. If you need meds, therapy, talk therapy, EDMR, yoga, your teas, you need your foundation, okay? But yoga really, changed my life and I wanted to help others. And then using the niche that I have, I don't know, I wasn't really too scared about it. I knew, like, I just felt led. When I tell you I started this in 2020. I started this in 2020. 2020, I was a yoga teacher, but I knew my whole life that I wanted to help others. I wanted to help other people who went through what I went through and felt what I felt and had to deal with that shame and guilt and grief and that constant. feeling like you can't speak up about what happened to you and things like that. It's just a passion of mine. Maybe a little bit at first, because I was like more probably like my close friends and family, nobody wants you to say nothing. Everybody, don't talk about the family. Don't talk about Bruno. like, like it was a little bit scary on that point, but my passion for it and knowing that I could really help others facilitate their own journeys of healing was way more worth it than having to, deal with the little bit of stuff that my family got to say.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you've done this and that you've taken this work on because you really are in a place where you can help so many people. And
Hmm.
I know from following you as well, you talk about how this needs to be talked about and not
Yeah.
just be swept away like, oh, well, that's in the past. And it's an ongoing healing journey. So, what would you say to any of our listeners who are survivors? If maybe they're looking for a yoga class, but they enter into the yoga class and they think, well, I don't know if this is actually going to be the healing place for me. Like, how do they find that healing through yoga? I mean, they can definitely go and check out your website. So be sure to tell us how we can connect there too.
I would say you can start with your own practice at home and really just, connect with your body and your breath. Maybe place a hand on the heart and a hand on the belly. Just start by connecting with your body. Like many survivors, I felt disconnected with my body before I started yoga. I hated my body because I felt as if what happened to me was my fault. And, um, you know, of course, you can like go on to. I have some YouTube videos too. There's a couple YouTube videos by the woman that I got my trauma informed yoga training from. Her name is Zabi Yamasaki, and she's awesome. She's um, transcending trauma through yoga. Like, if you want to go find her, like, definitely. Um, I'm. I think trauma informed yoga is like new. It's starting now to become something. It's still kind of new. So that's one place I definitely um, would send you to is transcending trauma through yoga, and start with working with yourself. Put on some light music and just sit with yourself for a moment. Tell yourself that you can stand in your power, have all the choices that you need. And that's really the beginning. If you feel as if a traditional yoga class might be a little bit intimidating. So, starting at home is a really good way to begin your yoga practice.
I love what you just said about you can have all the choices that you need.
Hmm.
I feel like that would be a really nice cue in any yoga class for any of our yoga teachers to also use
Yeah.
that invitation to do what we need.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that you wish yoga teachers understood? Not necessarily, when faced with someone who then comes up and tells us their survivor story, because
Hmm.
like we said, that may not happen. But is there anything that you wish, okay, if all yoga teachers understood this, then it would create classes that were more inviting, safer spaces for trauma survivors?
I would say I can't say enough that everyone has been through trauma. So having that awareness, maybe starting with yourself. How do you want to be treated or taken care of, or what type of person do you want like holding space for you in a place where, because not all the time when you walk into a yoga studio are you all happy and zen or whatever. When I started my yoga teacher training in 2020, I was going through one of the hardest times of my life. And every time I would walk into the studio, I would break down crying because, that was my place of safety and support. So, how would you want to be treated or held space for? That's how I would think about it. Start with yourself. We've all been through something, and maybe starting to use more gentle cues and think about how you want to be treated so that you can, it's like the practice of ahimsa, nonviolence. It starts with yourself first. If you're violent with yourself, then it's going to show outwardly. So be gentle with yourself, show yourself grace, show yourself compassion so that it can come out into your class.
That's amazing. I also wanted to say in the last 2 years, we're recording this in 2022 now. We're just starting the year off. There's been a lot. We've all been going through a lot. So I think this can translate to any yoga class. How can we hold space for people knowing that they're walking into this class or they're coming onto their Zoom screen with a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes in their lives?
I was going to say too, like maybe kind of reassessing your space and what you usually do, what music you play, because certain songs can be like, there are certain songs that remind me of a harsh time. And even though it might sound like cool and, chill, thinking about that again, thinking about if you're lighting incense, certain smells, um, knowing the people that come into your class every day. Some, at the end of my classes, I get somebody telling me, "Oh, I got a hip replacement. I have this. The music was too loud today." All of those things. Put that into consideration when you teach your next class.
How are you? So, did I hear you right that you're working with groups then of people when you work with survivors?
Yes. Mhm.
What size of group do you work with? Like, walk us through what that sort of looks like.
So right now, I just finished facilitating a trauma informed yoga session through Yale University. One, let me tell you, um, it's on Zoom. So it's very difficult because cameras are off. What we're talking about, the people in my class are survivors. So that's a hard thing. They're Yale students. They're working hard to get their degrees and things, and then on top of everything else from the world. And at first it was like straight silence. Straight silence, no cameras, and of course I give permissions to do whatever they need to do. So we usually have like a conversation about different things like trust or standing in your power, things like that. And I think it just gives a space for people to just feel like I don't have to do anything if I don't want to. I just want to lay on my mat or maybe listen to the voice or just know that I'm in a community of support with people that are going through what I've been through. And we go through the practice. I constantly remind them. And it's hard because I can't see them. I can't see the people I'm working with. Like if we're working in a studio space. So when I'm working in a studio space, I can see if a survivor's breath is getting a little bit too much and their face may be turning red, or you can see them breathing in their chest, or they may feel like the other day when I was just teaching a regular moderate class, but with my awareness, there was a big loud noise outside. It scared me too. right before Savasana. And I got up, I looked outside the window, and I was like, oh, it's just the truck next door, leaving a door open, not standing in front of the door. And that might, different things like that. So that's how it kind of looks. And then, I'll give little affirmation cards. I have, some affirmation cards, or I always provide those choices. I always like read a quote or a poem that has some type of empowerment in it. And yeah, and sometimes there's conversation that happens that's really intriguing, and survivors, they love it, because everybody needs to be, especially right now, to be cared for, and you know showing compassion, and just feel like I don't have to do anything if I don't want to. I can just be in my corner doing my own little thing, rocking or whatever. And it's just a really chill space without having to be looking around. Oh, I got to catch up with this person, or I got to do this. And just being able to be there for you.
Oh my goodness. Congratulations for working with Yale University. I feel like that's a big deal.
Yes.
And doing it on Zoom, I also wonder if there's a level of accessibility that then comes in if you can just show up from wherever you're comfortable, have your screen off, not have to be able to go somewhere and be in front of people, but at the same time really have that group where people understand, and like you said, where people feel like they're not alone. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you're doing this work. I feel like I hope our connected yoga teachers look at how they can sign up for a class for you if that fits what they're doing, what they need. Even just these takeaways of how all of us can be serving our students who may be dealing with trauma. I can really sense that you're taking care of people in the class, even when there's a loud noise outside and it frightens you and you want to just, it's okay, everyone, we're all here. Yeah, our nervous systems need that. So tell our listeners, how can they get in touch with you? How can they connect with you further?
The easiest way is on my Instagram at Nikki _Adams, ATOMS, like atomic bombs. And then if you want to reach out to me like directly, through my website, it's Nikki Adams, ADAMS, yoga.com. And you can check out what I'm doing. I do private sessions, and I run a 6-week program for survivors of childhood sexual abuse. So
that's amazing. We'll make sure to link to both your Instagram and your website. And I also saw on your website that you have some merch.
Oh yeah, I got merch on there. I haven't really, but yeah, I got some cool little sweatshirts and little hats and stuff on there. It says healing is possible, because that's what I believe in. Healing is possible. It's a journey. It's not a destination. It's work. And sometimes we even need to rest from healing and things like that. But healing is definitely possible. So,
oh my gosh, I love it.
If you want a little sweatshirt that says healing is possible, you can go on there too.
Thank you so much for your time today, Nikki. Thank you for the work that you're doing and sharing all of this with us. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Nikki, for this amazing conversation today, for really taking the time to teach us about trauma-informed yoga, and also how we as yoga teachers can help our yoga students who may be survivors. I love this quote that Nikki shared. If you're teaching yoga, you're teaching trauma survivors. So at some point, we need to have a look at our yoga teacher trainings and ask ourselves, do I have enough training to run a trauma-informed class? Do I have enough training to work with survivors of sexual trauma? If you have comments or questions about today's episode, head over to theconnectedyogateacher.com/268. There you can also find all of the links to connect directly with Nikki or any of the links that we mentioned in today's episode. I also want to say a big thank you to Crunch, who writes our show notes and said, it would be a good idea to put a content warning on this podcast episode. Here's the thing. People on our team, people like Crunch, in this instance right here, it really shows how much our team over here cares about our Connected Yoga Teacher listeners. And it shows up so much behind the scenes. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Crunch for coming forward with that comment in the show notes. As I'm reading here, I just really feel like Crunch is taking care of us in the best way in today's episode. I also want to send a huge thank you out to Suzanne and Sinead for making today's episode possible along with Crunch. Our team is unbelievable over here and they do so much behind the scenes, and I'm so grateful for them. I'm also grateful to you for being here for today's episode, especially if at any point it felt like it was uncomfortable or difficult to think about survivors of sexual assault. If any of this content was triggering in any way, I appreciate that you're here to look at how you can help yoga students and how we can create safer yoga spaces. That means so much. Thank you for being here. I also want to ask you, are you going to be in Denver, Colorado for Yoga Teacher Conf? It is happening at the end of this week if you're listening in real time. It's April 22nd to the 24th. I'm so excited. I'm teaching Yoga for Pelvic Health, which you can access via live stream as well. So if you can't make it there in person, you can still make it for the 3-day pass. And we have a coupon code for you as well. So when you go to yogateacherconf.com and you go to sign up for the virtual live stream, make sure to use the code Shannon Crow, all together, no spaces. Crow is exactly like the bird. And if you can make it there in person, Amanda McKinney and I are teaching an all-day workshop on the Friday. It goes from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. There is an hour-long lunch break. We are going to dig in and help you to get clear on your yoga business goals. That's called Scattered to Clarity. I am so excited to fly somewhere that isn't within Canada. It's been a long, long time to see people in person, to hug people in person. So if you want to check that out, head on over to yogateacherconf.com. Next week on the podcast, we are going to talk with Sham all about yoga philosophy and colonialism. This was an amazing conversation, and I cannot wait for you to hear it. So make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so that you do not miss an episode. And I will see you back here next week. Oh, and before I sign off, you know what I'm going to ask if you've been here before. I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?